Yo, 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 visualize shark takes, hit the wave grinding. In the chat, gun shark odds make it rhyming. Sunday vibes, smooth bets, no confining. Hats engaged, can't stop us from shining. Bet on the spread, liking it, keep it tight. Push the odds further, jack on the hindsight. Odds fellows mind grasp in the right sight. Hats, caps on heads, winners in plain sight. Hit the light, get in the chat, feel the flow, cash it, every dollar see the bank roll. Sunday grind and picks, now you gotta know. Extra points on the screen, sharp minds always glow. Big parlays, predictions we home. Standing tall, betting knowledge all.
On a suddenly not so casual Sunday morning to close September, it is Sunday, September 29, 2024. NFL, the extra points, the big show, NFL Week 4, the Shark and the Gun, right here live on Sharky Waters Nation. Come into the chat on X, on YouTube. You guys are drinking in the morning, coffee, water, booze, whatever. Come hang out with us. The energy is big time. Guns Picks, what's going on, brother?
Man, it's a beautiful Sunday. Well, the weather here is not very beautiful, but hell, who cares when you got a TV, you got a couch, you got food. It's going to be a beautiful Sunday to be watching NFL here. I can't wait to get into the slate. I have one of my perfected caps of all time that I can't wait to share with everybody. Shark, let's do it.
1 o'clock, high noon in Chicago, Soldier Field. I have a hat. We have a collaboration play. The first of week 4, Guns Picks. Chicago -2.5.
Yeah, Chicago coming back to Soldier Field. This should be an electric game playing the Rams. Where do you have Chicago coming from? Back-to-back road losses, all by one possession. -37 net yard average, -1 point differential for the year. The Chicago Bears are on the other side with the Rams. Are coming off a nice divisional home win in dramatic fashion. If you watch the end of that game, beating San Francisco, a team that has owned them historically, 27-24, despite losing the yardage battle, -129 net yards for the game. Then you get Chicago. Has struggled on the offensive end of the ball. They only put up 148 yards versus Tennessee, 205 versus Houston. But both of those defenses that they face are ranked 4th and 5th in the league in terms of opponent offensive yards per game and 5th and 7th in opponent yards per play. So take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. You just played a good defense there, Chicago. And then Chicago played Indianapolis last week, and you started to see this offense come to fruition. They faced a team that's ranked 31st in opponent yards per play and 16th in yards per game, 16th in yards per play, and 16th in defensive DVOA, this Indianapolis Colts team. So it was their best offensive performance of the year because they put up 395 yards of total offense, 332 of those through the air. On the other side here, we will look at the defense for the Rams. Struggled allowing opponents 426 yards per game of total offense. That's ranked last in the league. 6.8 yards per play, ranked last in the league, and 31st in defensive DVOA. So, once again, Chicago gets to face a bad defense. And then on the offensive side here for the Rams, they're dealing with a laundry list of injuries, including key position players, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Their offensive line is also banged up with multiple players on the IR, and the defensive secondary is injured as well. So, this team is trying to heal going into this game, but they're not going to be fully healthy going against this Bears team on the road. This plays well with the Chicago defense as they allow 287 yards of total offense to their opponents, 165 through the air. And the Chicago defense is ranked 11th in opponent yards per play, 8th in opponent yards per game. So while the offense is struggling, the defense is excelling in these positions. Also, just look at the trends here. Chicago, 8-2-1 ATS at home versus non-divisional opponents last 2 seasons, where the Rams are 1-7-2 ATS on the road versus non-divisional opponents last 2 seasons. So you have a bad ATS team in this position versus a good ATS team in this position. And then you just have the Rams coming off the highest motivational element here, beating their divisional opponent in San Francisco, who has owned them since 2019, like I said before. 2-9 straight up, 8-1 ATS. And now they have to carry the momentum into the Chicago game. I don't see them finding the offense here. This is a bad position here for the Rams. And this is why I think Chicago is due for like a big blowout type of game. And we may have it here. So give me Chicago -3 as the play.
Absolutely. And for the first time this season, The buy hat is engaged. Bear the fuck down in Chicago at high noon. Caleb Williams start too, and I think not coincidentally, in the opener, a cover. And Guns dropped immense, great knowledge there, so I'm not going to repeat what he said, but I do want to jump off that. This is where Chicago, even last year, with Justin Fields and with Tyson Bagent starting, is actually 8-3-1 ATS at home outside of the division in the last 2.5 seasons, and 6-0 straight up last 6, 5-1 ATS. So it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. This team under Eberflus is a home bye team. And as Guns mentioned, the Rams are hurt. They don't have their top 2 receivers. This is their 4th stadium in 4 weeks, which is going to be a theme of this broadcast. A lot of these teams have been all over the globe, to be honest. Some of these teams in the first 4 weeks really capping out at a bottom point now. And you go to the Rams off that win last week, down 14-0, huge emotional comeback. They're not going to be able to back up success with success like that. And the Rams are 2-10 ATS last 12 road outside of the division. This team hit gold a couple of seasons ago, winning the Super Bowl against the Bengals. They've been pedestrian ever since. McVay talked about retiring because of burnout last year. This is a a back-to-back sequence off a high. This is where Chicago will turn up. You want to buy Chicago as a home favorite. As I said, bear the fuck down. Chicago, turn them up, -2.5, 1 unit collaboration. Next play, we're going to the Meadowlands. We're going to MetLife Stadium in the Meadowlands. And Guns with the first total of this broadcast. Denver on the road, 2 in a row. Jets defense standing up under 39.
Yeah, I expect a low-scoring affair here in MetLife Stadium, East Rutherford, New Jersey. 1 p.m. is the kick. You got a Denver team coming off a 26-7 win over Tampa last week, plus 129 net yard average, plus 2-point differential, plus 33 net yard average for the year. And then you have a Jets team coming off a divisional home win on Thursday Night Football, so they have the extra rest going into this game, 24-3 versus my Patriots, plus 261 net yards for that game. Absolutely demolished them. And then we have the when you look at the New York Jets, you got to look at their weakness. It's stopping the run, really. They gave up 4.8 yards per carry so far this season, but the pass game, they're holding opponents to 151 yards per game, 5.4 yards per attempt. That's ranked 5th in the NFL in that statistic. And then you have the Jets, elite that also have an elite pass rush. They're ranked number 1 in QB sack percentage, 14.4%. So this is a team from a passing defensive perspective. The Jets are elite. And then you have Denver. Will have their work cut out for them here because they do not have a great run attack because they're held under 100 rushing yards in 2 out of the last 3 games. They put up 136 rushing yards last week versus Tampa, but Tampa's rush defense is ranked 26 in the league and opponent rush yards per game and yards per carry. So take that with a grain of salt there. Also, if you want some interesting, good ref trends, I like a good ref trend once in a while just to see where I'm at. Ron Tolbert and his crew is going to be officiating this game since 2020. Ron Tolbert's crew officiated games 43, 27, and 1 to the under, 61%. That is a pretty good statistic. You know, sometimes the refs affect the game. Then you have Denver, 24 and 12 to the under versus non-divisional opponents since 2021, 13 and 6 to the under after a win since 2021, and 17 and 9 to the under when they are a dog. Denver is ranked 6th in opponent scoring. The Jets are ranked 8th in opponent scoring. Line correlation here too, guys. We're looking at a team that's probably 7 and 7.5 point favorite in terms of the Jets here. And the total's sitting here around 38, 38.5, 39. If it's under 40 and you're seeing a possession or more on the spread, it's a high indicator. We're probably looking at a low total here, more so that it leads me to believe that it's more of a weighted line with the Jets, and you're not going to have a lot of scoring on the Denver side of the ball. Remember, the Denver scored 20 points with a garbage touchdown versus Seattle. Should have been like 14. Then they scored 6 against the Steelers, and then 26 last week versus Tampa. I just don't see this Denver team even getting near 20 points here. So that is why the indicator here. I think it's regression time for Denver. They're on the second leg of a back-to-back road trip as well, so take that in. 3 road games, 4 weeks for this Denver team. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair in the Meadowlands. Give me the under here at 39 as the play.
I wouldn't disagree. I mean, I think when you look at the situation here for both teams, to be perfectly honest, not great spots. Denver road back-to-back, as you mentioned, came out blazing hot last week in Tampa Bay. I was thinking just loosely, it's going to be really hard for them to back up that first half effort with another first half effort, particularly at a Jets team that is very focused and is traveling to London after the game. And I said this in football, it doesn't apply as much as basketball because it's not like literally a back-to-back nights where you need to conserve energy that much. But I think the Jets want to get out in front in this game and really just lock in and take care of business and hopefully not have to play such an intense game down the stretch. And I think in terms of the actual trends that are developing here in this early window of 2024 NFL season, the Jets were 0-2 ATS in the first half on the road, and they did come out blazing hot against the Patriots at home. And, truthfully, I think you could correlate the Patriots and the Broncos pretty similar to each other. Not a great quarterback situation, upstart defense, not expected to score a lot of points. I think you're going to see a similar scheme to what you saw the Jets do against the Patriots, which was just blitz at an incredibly high rate. I believe 34% of snaps were blitzes. And I think I heard a comment earlier this week that was the highest percentage of blitzes this defensive staff has ever called. I think there's no reason to take your foot off the gas. Bring the blitz on Bo Nix. Make him uncomfortable. I think this is probably a Jet spot in the first half. I think the under is very good. And this is something that Guns loves to talk about on a regular basis. When you see a high line, if you notice, most of the lines this week are very tight ATS. When you see this -8, 8.5, and an under right around 40, it speaks to gap. And it speaks to the favorite covering, and it speaks to the under hitting where the underdog does not score any points. So officially on the under for the Gun, and I think ultimately you would lean towards the Jets in some capacity. Guns.
Yeah, I need to correct myself because when I wrote this up, it was 7.5 when I originally put this bet in. Now you're seeing the line shift up and steam up to -9, yet the total is still at 39. It's just getting stronger of a play to take the under in this spot. And also, didn't talk about this one. I think the Jets are a perfect play for Survivor. You have this Denver team coming off a big win, especially for their rookie quarterback to get that done. And now you got to go on the road and try to bring that momentum up again for the next game. I regardless of the spread here, I think it's going to be a Jets win, and it's just going to be a low score.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people on the Broncos, and, we talk about this every single week. There are contrarian sides that are incredible, and there are contrarian sides that are terrible. And I think that buying low just on dogs relentlessly is just as bad as buying favorites every week relentlessly as well. And I think you saw what Denver could do last week, but as I said, it was mostly in the first half. And if you actually go through their first 3 games, they've only played one good half of football. They did not play well in Seattle. They played very poorly, particularly offensively at home against Pittsburgh. And then they were flat in the second half last week. So you ask yourself, 1.5 out of 6, and you think that's sustainable going to one of the best defenses in the league who's angry and really turning up here? This has to be an under, and it has to be the Jets. Our guys in the house, Dabby Cab, what up, boss? And we're going to the next play here. 1 o'clock, Lucas Oil Stadium, taking the Colts at +2.5 official. And really going through this is where you get a chance this week to fade a couple 3-0 teams. One on Sunday night, one at 1 o'clock in Indianapolis. And you're looking at Pittsburgh here. 3-0 ATS, 3-0 straight up. All of a sudden, Russell Wilson probably won't be the quarterback. Justin Fields is now great. The media narrative can shift in a half second. I thought as of a month ago, the guy couldn't play football and he was uncoachable. Now he's cerebral and disciplined. I just heard on NFL Network before. But that being said, win at Atlanta in the first game, 6 field goals, didn't do much on offense. More of a snapshot to Atlanta, 0-2 straight up in ATS at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Week 2 at Denver, just mentioned it. Denver offense, putrid, to put it mildly, 13-6. Bo Nix doing absolutely nothing, couldn't move the ball, 2 interceptions. And then last week at home against the Chargers. Chargers are playing with Justin Herbert, high ankle sprain, up 10-7 in the game. Herbert gets hurt again, gets pulled out of the game. Enter backup Taylor Heineke. All of a sudden, Pittsburgh runs off a 13-0 second half. So they beat a second-string quarterback in the second half. Has Pittsburgh done anything impressive? No. And you go to the Indianapolis situation. Indianapolis under Shane Steichen is 7-2 ATS last 9 at home. And as we mentioned last week, Anthony Richardson had not won a professional football game in his life until last week. He's been competitive at home. He did cover week 1 at home as a dog against Houston. But this is what happens all the time. When you start covering and then you win, it's upward movement you expect. This is a very short line for a very public favorite here with Pittsburgh, and an official play, Indianapolis plus 2.5. Guns picks, a collab.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we got to be taking the money line here. Outright winner with the Colts. Just look at the performance. When we look at Pittsburgh, their defense is their strength, right? They hold their opponents to 230 yards per game of offense, 3.5 yards per carry on the ground game, 5.8 yards per attempt passing, 11.1% sack rate. They are ranked 4th in the league in defensive DVOA. But the performance of Pittsburgh in the first 3 games is somewhat misleading. Let's break it down. Versus Atlanta, they played Kirk Cousins, who was just coming off a season-ending ACL injury in his first start. I don't think he was 100% for that game. His mobility was definitely shown as limited in that game. And, of course, they played Denver. Bo Nix, who is in the second game of his career, first home game of his career. And Pittsburgh won by 7, minus 44 net yards for that game. So take that with a grain of salt. And then, of course, they played the Chargers, played Justin Herbert, who was dealing with a humongous fat ankle injury. His mobility was limited. Even in the fourth quarter, they had to take him out and put in Taylor Heineke when the score was tied 10-10. So with those 3 games, doesn't really give me an indicator that Pittsburgh really has the best defense, or at least one of the best defenses in the league. And then, of course, Indianapolis will have Anthony Richardson running the ship, healthy, mobile, and progressing week to week. I think this is going to be a challenge here to contain Anthony Richardson today. And, of course, Pittsburgh's offense hasn't been great at all. 289 yards of total offense on average. They give up 8% sack rate to their opponents. Their rush is 3.6 yards per carry. Nothing on the offensive side is good for Pittsburgh. And this will be Pittsburgh's 3rd road game in 4 weeks. We're going to be exhausted talking about this because so many teams are in this position. They travel to Atlanta, then Denver, then back to Pittsburgh. Then they have to go to Indianapolis. Quite a travel schedule for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just a gauntlet in the beginning of the year. And then for Indianapolis, they're just comfortable sitting at home. 3rd home game in 4 weeks. Their only road game was right next door. I don't even think they had to take a plane to go to Green Bay. They just grabbed the car and drive over. And then you think, then I just think Indianapolis in this position will win this one against Pittsburgh that is yet to see a quarterback with mobility, speed, and 100% health. Their statistics are a little bit misleading on the Pittsburgh side of the ball. And then you got the travel exhaustion with Pittsburgh in this spot as well. I'm just not high on the Steelers this year. I just think their 3-0 record right now is a little bit fraudulent in my opinion. So yeah, Indianapolis is a play. Give it to me on the money line plus 110.
An alignment play, an opportunity to dominate. My next play is staying at 1 o'clock. Going back to the NFC North, we're taking the Vikings on the road at +3. And truthfully, there's a lot to unpack here as Minnesota is 3-0 straight up and ATS, and Green Bay is coming off of back-to-back wins themselves. But if you really start to go through it, Minnesota at the Giants in the opener, 28-6, complete domination at a pick'em, just obliterated the Giants, came home, beat the Niners, who we have graded to be the number 1 team in the NFC when fully healthy. Granted, there were a couple injuries, but still incredibly impressive win there. You come back home last week off a huge win, 2 huge wins, and you blow out the playoff Texans 34-7. So when I start to look at this, I say to myself, is that going sideways or the other direction? I don't think so. And I think this is deep psychology. I think this is Sam Darnold. You guys got to remember, he was the youngest starter in NFL history when he first started with the Jets at 21 years old out of USC. This kid's only 27. He's younger than Joe Burrow. And I was befuddled when I heard that. This guy's a young man, and he's finally in a good system. And I was talking about this on X earlier. I think Kevin O'Connell might be the most underrated coach in the league. We've talked about Kyle Shanahan. We've talked about the big dog in Detroit. We've talked about the ex-Philly coordinators. I think Kevin O'Connell could be the most underrated coach in the league. This guy's a psychological assassin. He's positive energy at the highest level. He instills confidence in his players 1 through 53. And I think he's connecting with Sam Darnold, and that locker room is absolutely focused and not going anywhere. And you go to the other side of this game, I think the re-entrance of Jordan Love into the lineup today, I don't think that helps the Packers. If you really go back week 1, their only non-cover and loss of the year was with Jordan Love. And then Malik Willis, 2-0 ATS, 2 home wins, 1 road win. So I think putting him back in doesn't help. And you go back to last year, Jordan Love was 1-2 ATS at home in the division last year. Took a margin loss against Detroit early season on prime time and got hammered by the Vikings last year at home 24-10. And did beat the Bears in the last week of the season 17-9. But it was the Bears, and they were completely falling off the grid at that point. And Jordan Love's only home covers last year, a game against New Orleans where Derek Carr got hurt in the second half and the Packers came back from 17-0. They blew out the Rams. Stafford didn't play. It was Brett Rippon. They came back on the Chargers' final possession. And you guys remember the Staley Chargers couldn't close games on the road. And they beat Kansas City, which was their only impressive win at home last year when Kansas City themselves was not playing good football. So in my opinion, Jordan Love has one impressive home performance in his career. And you go back to last year, as I mentioned, the home team was 0-2 in this matchup last year. Road blowout, Minnesota 24-10. Come back late season, Green Bay 33-10 in Minnesota. That was Kevin O'Connell. He's going to remind his guys this week, we got our ass kicked the last time we played these guys. This divisional revenge game, and it is a short line per line functionality. Green Bay on the road was -1. This comes in at -2. It should be 4, 5, or 6. This suggests a Minnesota outright victory today. Unofficially at +3. Guns, any thoughts on this one?
It's a complete pass for me. Listen, I looked at this game maybe for 5 minutes, and I was like, divisional rivalry. It's nothing that I want to be involved in here. I'm just gonna sit and pass on this one and move on to the next game.
No doubt. Next game, I will jump off it as I have more 1 o'clock officials here. Taking the Bengals on the road in Cincinnati at -4.5 overnight. That's 5.5 now. And really a lot to unpack in this one as well. I think you really find an incredible buy low on an 0-3 Cincinnati team. And last week, incomprehensibly, I would say, just horrendous defense against rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels. But I think if you really look at what's going on this season, even in the small window, 0-2 ATS at home, Patriots, Commanders, both non-playoff teams last year, which has been the perpetual issue with this group. They can't take non-playoff teams seriously at home. Key point, at home. 1-0 ATS on the road. Should have beaten the Chiefs. So you see the polarization of this team, what they're capable of. They can lose to anybody emphatically, and they can beat anybody in football. And clearly, if you say, okay, so they play down to bad teams, what is Carolina? That's not really the case here, because now this is full, utter desperation. You cannot go 0-4 and come back in an NFL season. I don't think it's ever been done, 0-4 to the playoffs. This is literally a game 7 for the Bengals today. And I think it's a great spot to fade Carolina. I think last week, Andy Dalton had his game to play. The first game with Carolina, the team got their bounce after removing Bryce Young from the lineup. Most of the time that happens, it's a one-game hit, and then they kind of come back to earth. I think that was also more symptomatic to Las Vegas last week, not playing well at all off a road win in Baltimore the previous week. So it was the Dalton show. Las Vegas didn't show up. Antonio Pierce chirped his guys in the locker in the presser after the game, saying they were cashing checks and just playing for business purposes only. Like Vegas was clearly in shambles. So it wasn't so impressive from Carolina. And one final point on this game, or two final points, excuse me. Cincinnati with Burrow is actually 4-0 ATS, last four on the road at the NFC. They do travel well in this spot, similar to how Lamar Jackson does. It's just out of conference scheme. The teams don't know them and that type of stuff. And I think more importantly, last year, Cincinnati was 1-3 straight up, so almost an identical record. And they went to Arizona, Josh Dobbs, Arizona, and they were laying a very short number. It was a real contrarian take on Arizona. We had this conversation about a year ago today, and we said on that broadcast, this is either going to be the Bengals bounce back and just hammer a team they should hammer, or books know something. It's a contrarian take. This is basically the same number at 4.5. That was a -3.5 at Arizona week 5 last year. Bengals 34-20. Buy it, live it, love it, and let's dominate. Stay at 1 o'clock. A couple games we want to talk about here. I think difficult games, but I think intriguing games for sure. I had looked at this particular game extensively all week. I really wanted to get a side. I put a poll on X. We appreciate you guys interacting with the poll. It's a great snapshot to public opinion. And ultimately, we want to have a conversation on this game, which will be intriguing. And I know a lot of people probably have action on. Eagles -1.5 at the Bucks. Guns, any thoughts?
Both teams are banged up. We talked about it before the show. I mean, who's going to be catching the balls for Philly today? Anybody? Smith is out. AJ Brown is out. Looks like Lane Johnson is out. Well, one of their tackles. So not only the offensive line, but the couple key weapons are going to be missing in this one. With the Bucks, I love taking them as dogs. I don't like taking them as favorites. They're not favored here, obviously. It's a real short dog in this spot here, but they're coming off a loss to Denver, embarrassed. I thought they played absolutely horrible. Granted, I'm not high on the Bucks full season. And then you have a Eagles team. Granted, they're coming off that nice win on the road versus Saints, but they couldn't score points in that game. And the decision makings by Eagles they're reverting back to the decision making they made in 2023 when they had a decent offensive line and they could make a push on a 4th and 1. They don't have that ability anymore, and I think there's got to be a realization that we need to just kick field goals for once instead of just going for it on 4th down. So I need to see a little bit better decision making there from the coaching staff for the Eagles. On the other side with the Bucks, their defense isn't great. Their offense can score on you, but they're one-dimensional. They'd rather pass than run. I will say Bucky Irving coming over from Oregon has kind of helped that run game a little bit. But in this case, both teams are kind of in a similar position, in my opinion. So I got to pass on this one. I'm not going to take any side.
Yeah, when I first looked at this, I wanted to take Tampa Bay. And our guy in the chat, Soundman, says, finally found you guys. We appreciate you. Welcome to the chat. And all you guys in here, please drop your comments. We'll engage you guys. When we have 2 people on here, we have a lot more time for a little conversational flow, and we want to really engage you guys. So let's continue talking this game, but I want to take the Bucks. The Bucks obviously laid down last week. This is the inherent bounce back, and this is also where you find Philadelphia in brutal travel yet again on this week 4. Brazil, back to Philly, New Orleans, now Tampa, road back-to-back. Had to grind the hell out of that game last week to get a win late. Philadelphia is 0-4, last 4 in the second game of a road sequence, so they haven't traveled well if they played on the road the previous week. Here's the problem. Quote last week from Philadelphia, "We keep receipts." What happened last year in the playoffs? Bucks 32, Philadelphia 9. This is a significant playoff revenge game. This is Jalen Hurts. It's probably not Sirianni. I think to a certain degree, he may have lost the locker room in terms of the voice. And we said this last week. We really think the Super Bowl run was incredibly built up by the coordinators, Gannon and Steichen, who are now head coaches in the league. And that's why you've seen a bit of a precipitous fall from the Eagles without those coordinators. but I do fear they'll find some second level energy in this game. And the second point that I really didn't like fading Philadelphia here, they've actually played great offensive ball on the road this year. In Brazil, 34 points, 410 yards. But I think even last week, go through that box score, they only scored 15 points, but they had 460 yards. How do you score 15 points with 460 yards? Well, I'll tell you how. End zone pick by Hurts, plus territory fumble, downs at the New Orleans 15, downs at the New Orleans 34, blocked punt, missed field goal. The game last week was a comedy of errors. The fact that they came out and won that game despite all the nonsense, in my opinion, makes them a buy low. Because if you play like ass and you still win, it means you do have some quality in you, and you add the revenge to it, and the fact they're still favored in this game without A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Guns talks about this all the time. If big-time players are not on the team for a week due to injury and the line barely moves, oftentimes that does speak to incredible strength for that team. And I think that Philadelphia, as much as there's a lot of sharp guys on the Bucs this week, I think Philadelphia might pull it out today. So just a conversation on that. Guns, anything else?
No, that's it, man. I like I said, I'm just staying away from it because it's just two teams that are banged up, tuned up. And you brought up the great points. Is like each side has a motivational factor in this one. You have the Bucs coming off that loss, embarrassed. Now they gotta pull up their bootstraps and come into this game strong. But the revenge factor's there for Philly. They keep receipts, like you said. Whose side is more motivated? The Eagles side or the Bucs side? I don't know. I think they're both motivated. But yeah, I'm just staying away from this one. I'll just sit there and watch that one.
Yeah, and another psychological point on this game, which I think is very polarizing. Hurricane Helene hit Tampa hard this week. Yeah. Hard. So it's going to do one of two things. Very little middle ground here. Either Tampa Bay, the Bucs, are going to be disrupted in practice. Maybe their houses were hit, issues with family, total disruption, or they're going to come out and be so impassioned by it to play for the city and the people. So I think we're going to see a completely polarized game here. I think one of these teams wins by margin. I really do. I think the Bucs are either terribly flat or they're incredibly impassioned. And I think the Eagles are either so on it for the revenge and all these elements we talk, or they're just dead on the second leg of a back-to-back. I really think this game is over a touchdown either way, which is incredibly interesting. Incredibly interesting. So, yeah. And Benjamin Rash said South Florida and Central Florida totally flat in correlation. In terms of the hurricane, South Florida didn't really even get hit. I don't know if you were following the weather. It came through the Gulf, and it hit Tampa, Tallahassee, and then went up through Atlanta. So South Florida didn't even really get hit. So this was really a Tampa, Tallahassee, FSU area thing. So much psychology in this game. But moral of the story, don't be surprised if one of these teams wins by more than 7 points, which would be a surprise on basically a pick 'em line. He's talking about USF, the college. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Anyway, next one, another divisional battle here. A lot of divisional games here for week 4. And you guys know I like divisional battle. Obviously, twice a year you get information. It's usually far more clear from a data perspective than all these out-of-division games. But this game I could not figure out. Guns, any comments? I have some points. We want to discuss every game here in detail. Jaguars catching 5.5 or 6 at the Texans.
Under. Listen, the Jaguars give me zero confidence moving forward. I might as well just throw away that Jags make the playoffs ticket for now. They looked awful on Monday Night Football. Now they're going to this game. They're going to be it's going to be a short week type of situational game for them. And then you got the Texans. Really didn't show up against Minnesota. Their offense last couple of weeks didn't look very good as well. Granted, you had to play the Bears, you had to play the Vikings. Those are great defenses. The Jags defense, a little bit suspect when it comes to the pass. Better against the run. You're seeing the line here sitting at -5.5. I think this is a strong line here for a divisional rivalry. I probably lean towards the Texans side, but it was just one of those games that offensively both teams are dealing with some issues. And granted, the defense edge is probably towards the Houston side. Obviously, D'Amico Ryans being a defensive minded coach. I just don't understand why the Texans offense can't really get it going. And when are they going to get it going? I mean, CJ Stroud and those weapons that they have at the receivers, Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon. Yeah, I mean, you got guys in that lineup that should be they should be scoring 40 plus points a game, in my opinion, but they're not. And I don't know what the answer is here. This is just a watch game to see if we got opportunities down the road. I'm just not high on the Jags, and really, I'm not high on the Texans either.
It's tough. It's tough. And, I was just looking here because we had this conversation last week, and I believe we had it in week 1. I don't think Doug Peterson is the coach for this group. I don't think he's a great NFL coach. I think he fits in that model of NFL coaches that have won one championship, very situational to a team catching wind in a season, a great roster with Philadelphia, a backup quarterback, Nick Foles, being incredibly hot at that point. It can happen. I mean, we've seen this for the last 40 to 50 years. There's a lot of one and done NFL head coaches in terms of Super Bowl championships or Super Bowl runs. Jacksonville is now currently 0-8 straight up the last 8 games that Trevor Lawrence has started, which is mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. Number 1 pick a couple of years ago, 2021. Remember the Jets were trying to tank for him. They won a late game to not get the number 1 pick. And now you look at his numbers. I honestly did a double take on this too. This season, he's 47 for 89 passing, which is only 52.8% completion. I mean, that is practice squad. That is like FCS garbage. And 560 yards in 3 games. I mean, we're talking absolutely abysmal numbers. 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. I mean, this is not the same guy.
Yeah.
And then I think to myself, is this just pure disruption with Peterson? And I think Peterson has completely lost this locker room. We said this before week 1. He's never been a juice guy anyway. So he's the type of guy where if it goes right, they follow because it's just everything's in line. But once it goes wrong, if you're not a juice guy like a Dan Campbell, you can't get it back. And I mean, going to Dan Campbell for a second, you heard it when they lost to the Bucs. The Lions lost to the Bucs at home. It was because he made a mistake and he didn't go for a field goal to end the half. He comes out, owns it so much. Like he was almost crying on national TV. That's where guys get behind guys off losses. Peterson's done nothing of the sort. It's blasé comments, it's platitudes, it's nonsense. He's got no juice. And I think this is potentially the absolute bottom out point for this team today. And I just looked. Doug Peterson is the second highest coach to get fired as of 6 days ago at plus 400. So his probability to get fired is skyrocketing. And some books have him now, I think, at almost 2-1. He might be number 1 now. I could see him getting canned after this game if they get blown out. And, you talk about CJ Stroud here off just the abysmal performance in Minnesota last week. We said it last week. For some reason, when CJ goes on the road outside of the division, he can't play football. We'll never understand why. Hopefully he'll improve. But that was basically what we expected last week. Maybe not 34-7, but we expected a poor performance. We expect to bounce back here. And I think D'Amico Ryans is a much, much better coach than Peterson. The line is all over it. So, and the last time they played, Jacksonville did win a game November 26th last year in Houston, 24-21. And that was a -1 line for Jacksonville. So talk about a line flip to Houston here. So lines all over Houston. Houston better coach, better quarterback, better mentality, everything. I think you probably have to take Houston here today. One more 1 o'clock game, another divisional game, another game that I kind of wanted to take, but just couldn't get there. Saints at Falcons, divisional game here, NFC South. Guns, any comments?
Yeah, I like the Atlanta side, actually. They're 1-2 in the year, -4-point differential, -19 net yard average. You got New Orleans coming off that loss. We kind of already dissected that one, 15-12 versus the Eagles. But looking at the box score, it was all Philly just moving the ball down the field in their territory and just making mistakes. So ideally, like Shark alluded to, I mean, Philly dominated that game, just couldn't put points on the board. And it was just coaching mistakes, missed field goals, errors by Jalen Hurts, throwing picks in the end zone. kind of ruined the game. However, really, when you look at the box score, Philly dominated that game. And you got Atlanta coming off that Sunday Night Football game. They had two late drives into the red zone in that game last week versus the Chiefs, and couldn't convert on fourth down. And granted, one of those was a missed PI call. The guy blatantly called pass interference. It was a no call by the refs, and it ruined Atlanta. And to me, Atlanta statistically won that game against the Chiefs. And then you got to look at what New Orleans wants to do every single game. They want to run the football. 4.9 yards per carry versus Carolina, 4.9 yards per carry versus Dallas. And then they came down to earth when they played Philly, only 89 yards rushing, 3.1 yards per carry. So if you can defend the run, you can beat New Orleans, and Atlanta can stop the run. Holding Pittsburgh to 3.3 yards per carry, and then Kansas City last week holding them to 3.9 yards per carry. So there is an element here that I think it's probably leaning me towards the Atlanta side here. I think Atlanta will most likely win this game. They're playing at home, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It could be a 1-1 here, split for the season when these two teams meet. But I think this is an Atlanta spot, and I would not take the Saints side.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think Atlanta gets there, but I think it's going to be tight on the line. I think they probably win by about 3 points. Our guy Cody says Falcons minus 2.5 max play. Well, if they win by 3, you win. So there you go. But I do think what you're looking at here is a pretty specific revenge game within the division. Last game of the year, last year, week 18, January the 7th, 2024, New Orleans did hammer down at home against Atlanta 48-17. This is a line flip from minus 3.5 New Orleans to Atlanta minus 1, which does suggest about a 3-point game. And I think it's a nice buy low on Atlanta. 0-2 straight up in ATS at home with Kirk Cousins this year, early season. But both close. We talked about the Pittsburgh game. Pittsburgh had 6 field goals. Atlanta couldn't do much. And then last week, you saw it. I think Guns mentioned the penalty not called in the end zone. Looked like a PI. And also symptomatic to not kicking field goals. If they had kicked a field goal, gotten the ball back, kicked another field goal, they win. Kick field goals, coaches. You don't always have to go for it.
That was another thing I didn't bring up too, is the decision making. You're going to give the ball back to KC, regardless if you score a touchdown, regardless if you score a field goal. You got it on that possession. They should have just kicked the field goal. It didn't. You weren't going to run out of time. You were going to get the ball back. All you had to do was make one stop. And I don't know what the mindset was to go for it on fourth down there instead of just booting the field goal, making a stop, and then having the opportunity to win the game. I don't know.
I think this going for it on fourth down thing is becoming like an epidemic.
Yeah.
I think it's like highly problematic. Like I think when it first started, coaches for years didn't ever go for it, and they were like actually holding their teams back. Now I think coaches are going for it far too much and holding their teams back. And you saw it yesterday in college, just slightly off the record here. Utah lost 23-10 last night to Arizona. 4 times they didn't get it on fourth and short. Kick 4 field goals, you're in the game by 1, and everything changes. And it's going to go back the other direction. It's the classic overreaction where things go so far one direction and so far the other direction, and it'll middle itself. Because I actually just get annoyed by it. Like, this isn't even necessarily gambling related. I hate to see players lose games because their coaches are basically holding them back with these nonsensical calls. And Smokey Bet says more aggressive play calling is leading to more unders in the NFL. And isn't that insane? Like, You're going for more points and they're getting less points. Like, somebody's got to wake up at some point because it's got to change. And again, we're not saying never go for it on fourth down. Don't regress back to 1995 here, but you have to be a little bit more precise with your decision making, not just go for it every time. Like Nick Sirianni, every time. It's like, guys, every situation is not created equally. Every time you're on the 35-yard line or the 42-yard line, it's not the same opponent, the same stadium, the same record, the same situation, the same game flow, energy, scheme versus scheme, nothing. It's so different. And that's where these coaches are actually completely brainwashed by analytics. Analytics tell you that 62% of the time this is the right call, but they don't tell you that's over 10,000 outcomes in 10,000 stadiums with 10,000 teams. There's differences in the data. So what the averaging does, it mutes the specific environments. And that's where it's like trend betting and sports betting, where people say 64% of the time. And I say, okay, what about the 36? Give me spot specifics, because it mutes the specifics, which are crucial to decision making. So it's very problematic, in our opinion, clearly, because we're ranting about it here.
Yeah, exactly's had it with us right now about talking about this. I think they want to play. Let's go to the next one.
Hey, don't ever complain about passion. Flatness is viral in this world. We love the conversation. We love you guys. Let's move.
One more key point. I just want to bring up this one. Smokey Bets brought it up. It's like a lot more unders. You can see it in the totals. Remember when totals used to be like 47, 48? That would be the average right now. Look at today. 41, 40, 44 and a half, 40 and a half, 39. There's like 148, 146. The highest total this week is 48 and a half. That's an indicator of what we're talking about. These fourth down conversions instead of taking points is killing totals.
Oh, without question. Without question.
Yep.
And taking a breath, 47 minutes in, 4 o'clock, 4:05 in the desert. Speaking of a game with a 48 and a half total, I think a snapshot to how this game will play out. A collaboration play. Guns had called this the Mona Lisa of handicaps. I'll throw it to the gun. Arizona, -3.5.
Yeah, I call it the masterpiece. You have Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. You have, the Mona Lisa. You have Rembrandt. This, you have Leonardo. You have Da Vinci, and all the artwork that's been done. This is the passionate, most epic breakdown of a game that you will ever hear from me. Washington versus Arizona, State Farm Stadium, Glendale, Arizona. 4:05 is the kick. You have a Washington team coming into Arizona on a short week. Another nice win for them, by the way, beating Cincinnati 38-33, despite losing the yardage battle in that game, -80 net yards in that game. Then you have Arizona coming off a tough loss themselves with against Detroit, 20-13, -96 net yards for that game. After 3 games, they have a +6 point differential, +22 net yard average on the year. And we look at Washington's defense, they're just not that great. They give up 377 yards per game to their opponents, 5.1 yards per carry on the ground, 71.9% pass completion rate to their QBs, and they only have a 4.2% sack rate, so they don't put pressure on the quarterbacks. They are ranked 32nd in defensive DVOA this season. The offenses that go up against Washington, by the way, put up 117 yards above their season average offensively. So when you play Washington, you have yourself a good game offensively. Then you have Arizona. Their offense has looked pretty good after 3 weeks. They run the ball very well, 5.2 yards per carry. Kyler Murray has a 68.6% pass completion rate, 7 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 1 INT on the year. And his receiving weapons are performing well, as including Marvin Harrison Jr., who looks like a potential top 5 wide receiver in the league after 3 weeks. He is exceptional in the ball game. And then numerically, this Arizona defensive stat looks mediocre when you look at their numbers. But look at the offense the offenses they've faced so far. Buffalo, pretty decent offense, I think. The Rams, granted, they're going through their struggles. Still a good, high-powered offense. And, of course, they played Detroit last week. Held them to 20 points. Okay? So that is pretty impressive, knowing that Detroit's offense is elite. All those teams, high-pace, high-scoring offenses, they actually hold their opponents to 34 yards below their offensive season average. So with the defense's numbers looking mediocre, they're making these offenses regress when they play them defensively. Then you got to look at Arizona. Some familiarity. And let's get into this for a second. They know the NFC East well. Their head coach, Jonathan Gannon, came over from the Philadelphia Eagles. He was the defensive coordinator there. So he joined the team. He was the head coach last season. And, of course, he's the coach this season. So Gannon has faced all these teams as a head coach last year. So when Gannon took over the team in 2023, here's how Arizona performed against the NFC East. At Washington, lost 20-16 as 7-point dogs, covered the spread. Versus the Giants, lost 31-28 as 4-point dogs. Mind you, a lot of these games, guess who wasn't the quarterback? Kyler Murray. It was Josh Dobbs was the quarterback in a lot of these situations. And, of course, versus Dallas, won outright 28-16 as 13-point dogs. At Philly, won outright 35-31 as 13-point dogs. 4 games versus the NFC East in 2023, 2-2 straight up, 4-0 ATS. And in the upset versus Dallas, 28-16, Arizona put up 400 yards of total offense against them. That was Dallas's 4th worst defensive performance in 2023. Arizona put up 222 yards rushing, 7.4 yards per carry on the ground game. That was Dallas's 2nd worst performance in 2023. And Arizona put up 81 yards above their offensive season average in that game. That was Dallas's 2nd worst performance in that game. And I bring these statistics up. Why? Guess who was the defensive coordinator for Dallas in 2023? His name was Dan Quinn. You know who Dan Quinn is? Dan Quinn is the head coach for the Washington Commanders now. So take that. Everything's tying in together with this cap here. Then you got to look at Arizona, 22-13 versus non-divisional opponents dating back to 2021, 9-4 ATS under Gannon. And this is the first time Arizona's been favored in a game since 2022, because I can't count that Rams game the other day because that was closed as a pick'em. And then Washington was favored 7 points against Arizona last year at home. And now the line functionality is swung to 3.5. That's a 10.5 point swing from year 1 to year 2. This is a masterpiece, man. I got Arizona at -3 early in the week, -125 juice. I would take it at 7. It doesn't matter to me. Arizona's the play today, and I love this cap.
Well said. It's deep psychology. Gannon dominates his old division. The old coach from the Cowboys now coaches the Commanders. The scheme will match up. And just a couple more points as I align on this play at -3.5. This is just a brutal spot for Washington. Road back-to-back, short week, huge win against Cincinnati on Monday night. Cincinnati outgained them 436-356. This is just not where a rookie quarterback's going to travel well. It was, as we said before, classic Joe Burrow and the boys, more so the defense just playing awful. And I think if you go back early season to week 1, only loss for Washington this year was at Tampa Bay. Same line. Tampa Bay -3.5, 37-20. You know, go back years and years ago. Arizona coach, who was it, Guns? Not Art Shell, the other guy.
Oh, Green? Was Green?
Yeah,
you
Denny Green.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, he was coaching the Cardinals, and he said, they are who we thought they were.
And we let him off the hook.
And he was talking about the Bears at that point. I think it was Rex Grossman Bears. But yeah, here's the key point. Here's the key point. Who is Washington? A team that's beating the Cincinnati Bengals, who can beat the Chiefs and went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago? Team that beat the Giants at home? Or a team that got their ass kicked 37-20 at the Bucks in week 1? High total, highest total of the board, 48.5. 57 points there. Road back-to-back. Short week. Arizona showing upward movement at home. Arizona 4-1 ATS outside of the division at home under Jonathan Gannon, a defensive coach. This is going to be a double-digit win for Arizona today. Another collaboration play, Cardinals -3.5. Staying at 4 o'clock, couple games here to discuss. Tough stuff, a lot of injuries in these games. Guns has the hat on. Throw it to him for some opening comments. New England getting 10.5 at San Francisco.
That's such a wild, aggressive line here for the 49ers. Like we already talked about before, 49ers coming off that loss. You look at Brock Purdy threw a late pick, kind of put them in a position where they could drive a few yards down the field, kick the field goal to win that game for the Rams. And then you're going against a Patriots team that really, offensively, they're anemic. I know they're going through the rigors of the transitional coaching from Gerard Mayo from Bill Belichick. But they're not going to go out there and put Drake May in anytime soon. I don't know when he's going to come in. I hope not this year, because that offensive line is going to get him murdered. They did put him at the end of the game on Thursday Night Football. He took one hit that was a little bit scary. And I just think this team is just kind of going through the motions, at least offensively. Defensively, I would still say that this is probably an under team, because the defense can go out there and still play at a high level. But seeing this line at -10 for the 49ers, knowing they have key injury, knowing they have a lot of guys that are hurt in this game, key weapons, offensive linemen, a laundry list of injuries coming off this team, and the line is still just sitting at 10. It just means to me it's an aggressive 49ers take. It's nothing that I'm willing to back money on, honestly, but seeing the line here at -10 and seeing the total at 42 is a kind of an indicator to me this is probably an under, but I'm not going to play this one at all. The Patriots are gross, and I'm just thank God I still have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, because NFL I can't even be a fan anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean this is it has to be a San Francisco spot in my mind. Obviously injuries. McCaffrey probably not coming back until November. He just came back from Germany. The specialist who I think has worked with numerous players, both NFL and NBA. Pretty sure this German doctor. But do we know if Deebo Samuel's playing today or George Kittle?
Yeah, I'm gonna look just to double check that one. I could have sworn that all those he was out, but I'll double check to confirm.
Yeah, because I mean, like when you start to look at this, the first thing that I had written down here, if you go back, through the Brock Purdy era, they've been incredibly effective at home as a double-digit favorite. I don't have the exact data in front of me, but they've been very, very good as a double-digit favorite. I know Guns has backed them numerous times actually in this spot. Last year against the Giants, I believe 30-12, a couple other ones, just blowouts. Obviously, with full personnel though being the key point, but I think like we said with Philadelphia is still holding as a favorite without their players. When you see San Francisco laying 10.5 without their players, theoretically, it's just a blowout line. And I think what you saw from New England in week 1 at Cincinnati is not going to translate here. And I think what you saw a cover in week 2 at home against Seattle, totally different than road here. And you get the Niners in a very unique spot off 2 outright losses. Not only that, but they lost at Minnesota last year. So that's 2 years in a row they lost at Minnesota. I guess it's just not where they play well. But the game last week, I mean, up significantly. Total melt, some mistakes. I believe a turnover, punt return, 38 yards, the final possession to get in a field goal range for the Rams. And, Fred Warner, who's, I think, an incredibly intelligent human being and probably the leader of the defense, had some great quotes about, like, enough is enough. I think you're going to see a hammer down here today. I don't know why I didn't play it. I just don't like getting involved in games where there's a ton of injuries and just like unknowns. But
yeah, I'm looking at the injury report right now. It looks like Debo's going to play. It looks like Trent Williams, he's questionable, but he's likely to play. They got George Kittle back. So they're getting healthy, especially on the offensive end. That's probably why the line is sitting where it is. A lot of guys coming back from injury. But who knows if they're 100% or not. And yeah, I think the only spot you can go with this is the 49ers, in my opinion.
Yeah, 49ers or pass. Next one at 4 o'clock, 4:25 here. Browns at Raiders. Crazily enough, I think people thought this would have been a pretty damn good game coming into the year. You had Las Vegas backdrop, Allegiant Stadium, beautiful stadium, upstart Vegas team with Antonio Pierce versus a Browns team that had, I think, pretty high expectations coming into the year. But you find both teams very low at the moment here. Both 1-2. Cleveland just off an abysmal home loss to the Giants, who we thought might be firing their coach this week. And then they go in there and beat Cleveland. And Las Vegas off just an abysmal home loss to Andy Dalton and the Panthers. So both teams off lows. We don't really like to buy games where both teams are coming off of basically the same position. Should improve. Guys, any thoughts?
All I see is like the Browns line open at -1.5, steamed up to -2.5. So I guess there's people that do like the Browns side on this one. Of course, Antonio Pierce in his press conference said a lot of the players made business decisions last week versus the Carolina Panthers, which kind of resulted in the loss and really not showing up for that game. So maybe there is a come up there. But like you said, the Browns are playing as low can be right now. giving up 21 unanswered points or something like that to the Giants in the first half, and then just completely nobody scoring in the second half of that game. I don't know what's wrong with the Cleveland Browns, because a lot of people were high on them. They have a roster that's playoff caliber, but the offensive woes are apparent. Deshaun Watson, I think the investment that the Browns put in on him is looking like a diminishing investment, and I don't know if they're willing to make the switch at quarterback if need be at some point, because I know they have so much money dumped into him that they feel like they're obligated to play him. He's broken, and both teams are coming from the lows of lows. I don't know which side to take on this one. It's just a complete pass for me.
Yeah, I have written down here, is either team awful, mediocre, or showing upside in the future? Like, I think there's, honestly, of all the games this week, anything could happen. Like, it's just unreal. And, we're just to close this game very quickly, but Cleveland is 0-2 ATS at home. They are 1-0 ATS on the road as a road dog at Jacksonville. And, I think Jacksonville and Vegas kind of fit the same conversation, like middling to bottom level AFC opponents outside of the division. And I saw some people on Cleveland this week, and I said I couldn't disagree. I mean, I think that you might see a similar performance, just a dud game. I mean, they won that game 18-13. It was pretty close. Jacksonville had their chances. I would lean towards Cleveland, and I think Vegas here coming in here. I don't even know if we know who's starting today, do we? Because there were some speculation that Aiden O'Connell might be the starter. We know?
Yeah, I'm actually double checking that now. That's a good point, because I mean, have they just like said we're not doing Minshew mania anymore? I'm seeing Gardner Minshew as a starter still. We'll see if that happens. Of course, no Devontae Adams in that game either, and they're going to be without one of their right tackles as well. So injuries probably leading to the steam to the -2.5 side for the Browns. Max Crosby's doubtful as well, so that's going to hurt the defense. And then they got one of their linebackers is going to be out for this game, so they're banged up, they're hurt, and key players for the Raiders out on this one. So yeah, unbackable on both sides still, in my opinion.
No, I agree. It's brutal. It's a brutal game. If I had an office pool or something, I'd probably take Cleveland, particularly with Devontae Adams getting hurt in practice, as you said a couple of days ago. And I think Max Crosby's not playing either. So a lot, it's just all over the place. Final game at 4:25 here. Chiefs-Chargers, huge divisional game, kind of marred by injuries, as seems to be symptomatic of the entire league. Nonetheless, it seems that Justin Herbert will be playing this week, bye week next week. I guess going to try to gut it out. The guy's a total gamer. Guns, had you gone into this one on detail, or what do you think?
Yeah, I have concerns with the Chargers in this one. And normally, when the Chargers are a dog versus Kansas City, I used to love backing the Chargers. It didn't matter what the line was. But however, the injuries are just really apparent. We talked about Justin Herbert, but their two left tackles are not. I mean, their two tackles are not going to be in this game. Joe Alt is out. Rashawn Slater is out. So that's a concern to me, that the protection is going to be diminished today with a team that prefers to run the ball and hammer the rock under Harbaugh's new scheme. And as much as I wanted to, I hate taking the Chiefs as a favorite in any type of situation, because they're just not a good covering team. Also got to look at the defensive side for the Chargers. No Joey Bosa. Their secondary is all listed as questionable, so they're banged up in the secondary as well. This team is hurting going into this game, limping in. And I mean, seeing the Chiefs, I'm not impressed with the Chiefs at all. Granted, they got a horseshoe of luck in a lot of these games. We talked about the Falcons game. I don't have to talk about the game in week 1 versus Baltimore, of how that finished off. They're just getting lucky week to week. I don't think this is the spot to take the Chargers here, but also I don't think it's the spot to take the Chiefs either. Who knows who's going to cover this one?
Yeah, no, so many injuries. And, you saw Herbert last week. I don't know if you can trust that he's going to make it through the game again. Like he gets hit once, just a weird hit, and he's gone. And then all of a sudden you're with the backup, Taylor Heineke. And as you said, the Chiefs have been unimpressive. We're very fortunate to cover last week at Atlanta. We're pretty fortunate in week 1 to cover against Baltimore, and didn't cover against the Bengals. So it seems like no matter what the Chiefs do this year, at least in the early going, it's going to be a one possession game, like no matter what. So I think you would lean towards the Chargers from that standpoint. And I think there will be a certain amount of locker room juice here for the Chargers. Second divisional home game, already 1-0 ATS in the division at home against the Raiders in week 1. And Jim Harbaugh in the locker room with these guys, just getting them to a higher level of competitive quality versus the Chiefs, who, we've said this before, Chiefs have won 2 consecutive titles. These regular season games don't mean anything to the Chiefs. Like, you're probably not going to see the Chiefs' best football. I mean, you could actually make the argument until the playoffs. Because, I mean, they can coast the entire regular season. And they proved last year they don't even need home field advantage in the playoffs. So it's like it just keeps getting more and more flat for the Chiefs in the regular season. There's no reason for them to show up. And all they have to do is win like 10 games, 10-7, get a wild card and get in. And I'm not saying they're going to lose 7 games, but that's all they need to do. And not only that, but it's not even being flat and not caring. It's also the fact that there's such a fatigue off of 2 years playing until February. And, the international tours, the whole show business aspect of this team, it fatigues them where they will just reserve energy all fall until they need to turn it up in December, January, and February. So I like the fact that Chiefs are sitting here 2-1 ATS with all these psychological points to fade them. I think they're just an incredible fade. Just every week, pretty much going forward. So I would significantly lean towards the Chargers here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed the total was pretty low in this one. It was open at 43, now it's 41.5. I mean, you're dealing with a 7-point spread line. Is another correlation type of situation. You're probably not going to see a lot of scoring here from the Chargers, is what that indicator is. So if there's a lean on this one, I'm going to throw the side out, and I'm going to say like the total is probably the way I'd go, and probably lean towards the under.
Yeah, definitely. Final official play of the broadcast, 8:20 p.m. Sunday Night Football, M&T Bank Stadium, taking the Ravens at home, -2.5 for 1 unit. Another great buy low spot here. Ravens started 0-2, lost in KC. Isaiah Likely, half-inch from a touchdown, would have covered. Week 2, only home game of the year, up significantly. Get outscored 13-0 by Vegas in the fourth quarter to lose. Last week, we backed them correctly. They took care of business at Dallas. Now they come home, biggest home game of the year so far. And you get an opportunity here to fade the Bills, who are clearly a very good team. We've hyped up the Bills for years on this show. But now you're looking at a 3-0 team as an underdog. That should tell you something about where books think the law of averages lies in this matchup. It's not on the 3-0 team. It's on the 1-2 team improving. I look at the Bills. Non-cover in week 1 against Arizona, down significantly, just kind of a BS game for them. At Miami, week 2, Thursday Night Football, Tua throws 3 interceptions early. Just the game's over before you could even turn on the TV pretty much. And then Tua, of course, gets hurt when it appeared that Miami might be coming back a little bit in the second half. And then last week, absolute blowout. We had it incorrect. We had Jacksonville. I mean, that was just a demolition, 34-3 at the half. And we said it before when we discussed Jacksonville. Doug Peterson now, in some books, number 1 to get fired. 0-8, Trevor Lawrence last 8. Constant conversation here. Is it because the Bills were so amazing, or is Jacksonville just terrible? So the point here is Buffalo doesn't really have an impressive win yet. And Kansas City has played much higher quality competition. And final point on this game, these teams did play actually week 4 in 2022, October the 2nd it was. Buffalo did win the game in Baltimore, 23-20. Key point there, Baltimore was up 17-3 in that game and blew the game. And the line is telling us a story. Buffalo was favored -3.5 in that game. So 2 years removed, same quarterback, same teams. Buffalo wins in this stadium. Now they appear to be better in the small window, early season 24. Now they're an underdog to Baltimore. So books like Baltimore here. This is one of those spots where unavoidably, if you trust intelligent information, data, sports books, and understand the law of averages, you take Baltimore at 820. That's precisely what I'm doing. Baltimore minus 2.5. Guns. Will you get there tonight?
I think so. I think this is a Baltimore spot to me. You said it. Who's Buffalo really played? They played an Arizona team that's ranked in the middle in terms of defensive DVOA. They played a Miami team overall DVOA. They're ranked dead last in the league. And then you got a Jacksonville that's ranked 28th in overall team DVOA. So now you're playing a Baltimore team that is hungry. They're 1-2 in the year. 2 games they've lost by a possession or less, 7 points and 3 points. And Baltimore wants to run the rock. They can do it here. 5.9 yards per carry on the season, 203 rushing yards per game. They're ranked second in the league in yards per game and yards per carry in terms of the rush. And then if you know anything about Baltimore and their defense, they've been gashed in the run game. 4.7 yards per carry this season. 9th. They faced the 9th, 16th, and 25th best rushing offenses in the league. So this is a step up in class in terms of rush offense that Buffalo will have to face here. And then I was looking at some statistics, and I'm leaning in the direction that from a prop standpoint that probably Josh Allen and his rushing yards will probably go under. If you look at how Baltimore has done against the run, they've held opponents to 2.8 yards per carry overall. Their pass defense is a little bit rough, so it's a little bit scary there with Buffalo knowing that they can pass the rock. But look at what they've done with the quarterbacks in terms of rushing. Pat Mahomes, 2 carries, 3 yards. He averages 4.1 yards per carry for the year. So they held him down. And then, of course, Gardner Minshew, granted, some of these quarterbacks aren't running quarterbacks. He had 1 carry for -1 yards. Worst rushing performance of the year for him, though. So in the game sample size, his worst performance running the ball was against the Baltimore Ravens. And then, of course, Prescott last week, 2 carries for 7 yards. So this team is able to contain QBs from running the rock. This is going to be a challenge for them with Josh Allen because Josh Allen has gashed them in the run in the past. But I think in this situation with that defense of how they're set up, if you can contain Josh Allen and not allow him to create offensive plays with his feet and keep him in the pocket, I think he gets uncomfortable and doesn't play very well. So Baltimore does have a ATS history with them, 5-1 ATS last 6 meetings versus Buffalo, but Buffalo has beat them 23-20 last year, so slight revenge spot here for Baltimore. And if you've ever been to a Baltimore game at night, which I have, I watched the Patriots lose to them when Tom Brady's last year with the Patriots. It's an environment, man, and it is going to be rocking. This is a huge game for them. An AFC East team going to go play Baltimore at night is unbackable, in my opinion. So I think Baltimore is the only spot to go, and you can just scrap the line at -2.5 and just take them on the money line.
Yeah, I completely agreed. And just to clarify, that game played was 2 years ago, 2000.
Yeah, 2 years. I'm sorry, I have it in my notes, 2022.
Yeah.
My fault.
But yeah, without question. And again, it's a Joes versus pros type of spot. You know, the public generally looks at recency bias and assumes it can never change. And more often than not, particularly in pro football, where it's 1 game a week, things can change drastically week to week. Buy the Ravens tonight, and let's dominate. Talking about Monday Night Football very quickly. The first game tomorrow night, 7:30 ESPN. Absolute gas can game. Tennessee at Miami. Miami coming off of a blowout loss with Skylar Thompson in Seattle. Now, ex-Raven backup Tyler Huntley starting for Miami. That got announced 2 days ago. The line shot up from -1 to -2.5. Tennessee, I don't even know what to say about Tennessee. They crushed us last week. They blew the game epically in Chicago. They blew the game against the Jets at home. The first point when I think about Tennessee, and I hate to say this because I like Will Levis. His commercial about mayo had me cracking up. I don't know what he was doing. He was doing like a freaking split over a mayo can. I don't even know. You guys will probably see it on TV.
He puts mayo in his coffee. That's his gimmick, right? That's his thing.
Well, he did a mayo commercial, like Hellman's. Yeah. Well, I don't even know, but he's doing a split like a gymnast. I don't even know, but I like Levis. I think he's like a good dude. I think we'd probably enjoy like having beers with him. But as a pro quarterback, I mean, he's been a turnover machine, and it really looks like he's just trying to do too much. Like some of these picks, like the pick 6 he threw in Chicago, he should never even be throwing that ball. And that's just classic trying to do too much. That's not a lack of talent. He's just overwhelmed. And I can't back Miami here. Last year, Tennessee actually did come back significantly in Miami, down huge and cover the spread. I would like to take Tennessee. Guns, any thoughts?
Seeing Miami as a favorite here just gives me some weird indicator that we're looking at a Miami. I mean, there is a revenge element there because, like you said, they played on Monday Night Football before. Will Levis actually had a pretty damn good game in that position, knowing that but the market value of Miami at that time was significant. It was too high, in my opinion. So taking Tennessee on that spot was a perfect spot on Monday Night Football. But in this type of situation, Will Levis, I backed you 2 weeks, dude, and you continue and like you have control of the game statistically. You're moving the ball, but you hurt yourself by making bonehead decisions in where you should just take a sack once in a while, buddy. It's okay. You don't have to, and then making throws in double coverage on a receiver, and you're just trying to do too much, like Shark said. This team, to me, right now, defensively, they're perfect. They're such a good defense. However, it gets diluted by the fact that your offense is so abysmal. Total here is sitting at 37 for a reason because the books are like these two teams can't score, and obviously with the Dolphins, the quarterback situation is a little bit wild now, and you said it. Like Skylar Thompson was a bad quarterback. Thankfully, he's not going to be playing in this one, and it looks like it's going to be Huntley. But yeah, there's just no position I can get behind in this game. It's a complete pass for me.
Yeah, I'm looking at the game last year. Wild game, terribly played game. But this seems to be the kind of the Will Levis mold, I hate to say. Like, it's just garbage football games. Like last year, Tennessee was up at the half, 10-7. Then they come out in the third quarter and proceed to go down 27-13, just like that. And what again is always the problem here. I'm looking at the play-by-play. So Miami came out in the second half with a field goal, another field goal. So the game was tied at 13. Then Miami scored a touchdown. So they went up 20-13. Very next possession, first play, Levis fumbles the ball. And then they scored. It's like, dude, just take the sack. So it's just garbage. Like, you don't want to back this guy. And then, of course, he comes back with 2 touchdowns in the final, 5 minutes to win the game, 28-27. It's just garbage. It reminds me of just like mid-level college football, to be honest.
It's telling to me that they're a dog when the Dolphins are on their third QB. I mean, but nobody trusts Tennessee, and it's the Will Levis factor. I'm sure if you put in any quarterback that's in that lineup right now outside Will Levis, that line will shift significantly towards the Tennessee side, knowing that they're not going to be 3 turnovers egregiously by Will Levis.
There has to be a better quarterback for this team. I mean, there's definitely unsigned guys. I mean, like you see it every year. I mean, like look at last year. Joe Flacco's on his couch. He comes back and goes to the playoffs. Like there are better quarterbacks out there, somewhere between the age of 21 and 45.
Right.
I mean, this guy's just garbage. Absolute garbage. Final game on the card here. We're going long today. Guns and I are having a great conversation on this beautiful Sunday morning. Monday night, big game here, 8:15 ABC. Seattle at Detroit. Third year in a row these teams have played, interestingly enough. Seattle has gotten these guys 2 years in a row, both in Detroit. It's the third straight year Seattle's playing a road game in Detroit. Go back to 2022. Seattle won the game 48-45, crazily enough. 1,075 yards in that game. Speaking of college-style games, last year, Seattle got Detroit 37-31 in overtime. So Seattle's beaten them 2 times in a row, both tight one-possession, high-scoring games. Key point in that one last year, Detroit had 3 turnovers. Seattle had none. Line is holding here at 4.5. It speaks to Detroit, in my opinion. I think that the double revenge is real. I think the fact that they had some late turnovers last year, which did give Seattle the win, I think that can be corrected. But I think Seattle here is sitting at 3-0 straight up, 1-0-2, 2 pushes ATS, fool's gold. Bo Nix at home, Jacoby Brissett on the road, and Skylar Thompson at home. We talk about Pittsburgh being fool's gold to a degree, Buffalo maybe being too hot. 3-0 Seattle versus a rookie and 2 journeyman backups. Maybe the most unimpressive 3-0 in the entire league. I think this could be a quality check on Monday night. I will be looking at this in more detail tomorrow, but I think Detroit would be the lean here. Guns, any comments?
I'm actually eyeing in on the total. You look at the last 3 games because they faced each other 2021, 2022, 2023. Most electric ones have been the back-to-back in 2022, 2023. I mean, 37-31, 48-45, 51-29. Huge numbers on both sides. And the totals in those games were 41.5, 48.5, and 47 on the close. And you're seeing now, what, 46, 40, 46.5 on the board. Why isn't this total 50? 52, 53. These teams have gone against each other and scored massive amounts of points. I think this is probably an undertake for me. Granted, primetime unders, we know about the trends with that. But I think when you see over, when these two teams meet, it's time to go and swing in the other direction and hit the under. I think this is more of an under spot than a spread spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. 46.5 here after just track meets the last 2 years, particularly going to overtime last year.
Last 3 years.
Yeah.
51-29, 48-45, 37-31. Huge scores.
Yeah. Definitely. We'll be looking at that in more detail tomorrow. Almost noon here on the East Coast. We see you guys across the world. It is Sharky Walters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. 6 top plays for me on this card. Chicago -2.5, Indianapolis +2.5, Arizona -3.5, Baltimore -2.5, Minnesota +3, Cincinnati -4.5. Chicago, collab with the gun. Indianapolis, collab with the gun. Guns picks officials, Denver, New York Jets under 39. Oh, and collab, Arizona -3.5. 3 collab plays. Take notice of that. It is NFL, the extra points, the big show, NFL Week 4, 2024. The Shark, the Gun, and the Odds Fellow somewhere in the atmosphere will be back within the next month playing flag football with his amazing kids. Shout out to you guys in the chat. Shout out to you guys who watch and don't say anything. We see you guys anyway. We know you guys are amazing people for hanging out with us. We love you guys. Sending you guys amazing vibes. Let's dominate this card. Guns picks, a pleasure. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody that's hung out with us today on your Sunday morning. Make sure you like and subscribe to all our channels, Guns Pick channel and Sharky Waters Nation channel on YouTube. And also check us out if you don't follow us already on X at Guns Picks, at Shark in Sports, and Sports 88 on X. Give us a follow and get engaged in the comments. I appreciate everybody in the comment section giving their information, giving their plays and their opinions on this one. But we're going to join you next on Thursday for the Extra Points Thursday Night Football edition. So check us out. Also check us out on Fridays, 7 p.m. With our college Knowledge for College show, college football. We had a pretty decent college football day. We were talking about that off air. So please join us for that as well. Good luck with your plays on this beautiful Sunday. Let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the board. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang.